Welcome, welcome. And the Sedra we're working on for this coming week is Ve'et Hanan. It's the second Parsha of the book of Dvarim, of the book of Deuteronomy. And again, it's a continuation of this speech that Moses is giving to the Jewish people, and really with huge encouragement not to lose faith and to be loyal to the Torah and loyal to God and not to worship idols. And so we're going to continue with that, and I'm going to start to share the screen with you. Let's see what I've got here for you. There we are. Okay. All right. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
So here he is, Moses saying, V'nishmartem ma'od l'nafshotechem. Guard carefully, ma'od, very much. Guard very much your souls. Ki lo re'itim kol tmuna, because you did not see any picture, anything that showed something. Bayom diber Hashem alechem, on the day that the Lord spoke to you, bechorev, in Chorev, mitoch ha'esh, from the midst of the fire. So, of course, in Deuteronomy, Mount Sinai is known as Mount Horeb. That is the terminology that we use for Mount Sinai at that particular moment. But he's saying, when you really experience the divine voice, right? When God spoke those first two commandments to you, and you heard God, you had an experience of the divine, this powerful experience. You didn't see any picture of anything. Right? You did not see an image of anything. So this is a very serious warning that Moses is trying to put out, that there is nothing physical in this world, right? Anything that can be depicted that is worthy of worship, of giving ultimate trust and that kind of thing to. And to be very careful, and just that expression nishmartem ma'od le'nafshotechem, that you should guard your souls very carefully, not to be lured into that. And of course, the other part of it, I think, the idea that something can be captured with an image, to think that the divine, the transcendent divine creator can somehow be captured in that kind of way. Is also another way of understanding that God's greatness really spans the ineffable. Going on, warning them. Pen tashchitun, lest you act perversely. Va'asitem lachem pesel, and you make for yourselves a statue. Tmunat kol samel. So again, this would be an image, right? An image of anything. Lauren, forgive me, I overlooked looking the word up, samel. Do you have that handy for you there?
It says, well, I'll have to read the whole sentence because I can't
Right.
tell which word is which, but it says, lest you become corrupt and make for yourself a graven image, comma, the
Okay.
representation of any form, comma,
Yeah, male or
the
female. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So image, I guess, is what they're saying, is graven image here. Okay.
Well, that looks like that maybe, is that not pesel?
Yeah, that's true. But by the way, the Aramaic is helpful here because he says demut kol tzura, meaning the likeness of any shape, right? So that's
Yeah.
beautiful translation of
Yeah,
the
and here the representation of any form.
right. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to type in that word there so that I have it for myself.
Well, I think it's semel would be then form or shape because tumunat would be the likeness or
Right, right,
representation.
right. So thank you. Okay. and likeness. Let's do that here. We'll put that in here. So, whoops, sorry. Stuff in there. Okay.
Here it says representation, so either one.
Yeah, well, likeness is
I
represent.
mean, because like in modern Hebrew, it means a picture, right?
It does. It does. That's the word. So, yes, yes. So here we go. Tavnit. Here's the form. Tavnit, right? Zachar or nekeva, male or female. I thought that was interesting too, by the
And
way.
here it puts likeness, but yeah.
Yeah, I like the word tavnit as meaning a form, a shape of male or
Well,
female.
is
Yeah.
it applying something built?
Yes, something they're constructing something.
Structure.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. In the shape of. So
Mm-hmm.
but also there's I'm wondering to myself and trying to meditate a little bit on, what the point is he's making here of male or female and what they understand by maleness or femaleness, right? In other words, to try and look a little deeper, because we know that they had there's the whole notion of what maleness represents and what femaleness represents, right? Um, and understanding that neither are worthy of worship. So anyway, going on, tavnit, the likeness, the form, call of any behema, cattle, right? Asher ba'aretz, which is in the land. Tavnit kol tzipor kanaf, the likeness or the shape of any winged bird. Asher ta'uf bashamayim, which flies in the skies. And I don't think they have Rashi here. We aren't going to have any Rashi until verse 19. Okay. Tavnit, again, the form, the shape, kol remis, of any creeping thing ba'adama, on the earth, anything that creeps on earth. Tavnit kol daga, the likeness or the form of any fish, right, or sea creature, asher ba'mayim, which is in the water, mitachat la'aretz, below the earth. So again, it's interesting that he is specifying in this particular way to create and perhaps underscore what he's talking about and being very specific. Kol daga, any fish, right? We had that. Uvpen tisa einecha, lest you lift up your eyes, hashamayim, heavenwards, V'ra'iti et hashemesh, and you behold, you see the sun, the et hayarech, or the moon, the et hakochavim, or the stars, kol tzava hashamayim, the whole host of heaven. And this terminology of tzava hashamayim, it has to do, we know it's the modern word for army, but I think it means sort of an array, or some kind of organized pattern. V'nidcha v'hishtachavi, and nidachta, you turn aside, v'hishtachavita lahem, and you worship them, you bow down to them, va'avadatam, and you serve them.
I always thought of it as more of a multitude, referring to great numbers rather than a specific order or pattern.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason why I'm thinking of it is that an army, it isn't just a large number of people. It has very much to do with how well they're organized together and work together. Otherwise, they just sort of fall apart.
Yeah,
And
but it's used in a lot of other contexts, I think, as just referring to great numbers.
I'm not as sure. You'd have to give me the examples.
Oh, I don't remember. I just know because I know the word that I see it all the time and I note what it's
Yeah, no, I
means,
think it's
and then when I see it.
I think, quite honestly, I think that Israelite culture was very much influenced by Babylonian culture, and we know that the Babylonians were astronomers because they were astrologers. that there was this belief, as there is today, that somehow we are influenced by the course of the stars and the heavens. And I believe that in that first prayer before the Shema, right, where it says Ma'ariv Aravim, etc., that actually where it talks about how God organizes and arranges the stars, is the way in which Judaism takes into consideration the astrological ideas, the ideas of astrology, but yet says, nevertheless, they are not just the physical elements of them, that in fact there is that the divine hand is behind all of this. And I think that that's actually the way in which Judaism deals with it. In other words, the idea that of determinism, meaning that we are so influenced by nature, by the host of heavens, etc. I mean, I think this is the way in which people in the past try to connect their own lives into nature and make it part of it. But to say that we don't believe that is the ultimate control of our lives, that in fact God controls those very things. That notion of transcendency. But that Tzvah Hashamayim is more than simply the numbers of it. I think it has to do with its influence and its power and things like that. So I'm pretty convinced at this point that that's taken seriously. I mean, the fact that I'm aware, if I'm correct, that Indian culture in India and in the Far East, they still very much take very seriously astrology and those sorts of things, and feel that it has a lot to say in terms of human behavior. But yeah, I know we
I guess it's
reject it.
because
Yeah,
also when we use the word host, it generally means multitude, in English
I think it's the old word
translation.
for army, though. I think it's an antiquated word for army.
Well, it's actually um related to the words guest and host.
Yes. Okay, but also I wonder if the word hostile
And
might be
for
to it.
yes, that's related because foreigner, yeah,
Mhm.
but I don't know
Check it
about
out. Yeah. I mean, I
I am
really,
looking it up.
yeah. Okay.
So so like stranger,
hmm
foreigner,
hmm
enemy, yeah.
Okay.
And it's interesting that those would be related to guest.
Right. It is
Stranger and
interesting.
guest like the
Well, I
same
mean,
root.
okay, I think it has to do with encountering. The fact that it involves an encounter of some kind. But I think of like the host descended upon whatever, and it means the army descended, this organized mass of human beings. But I think it's got to do with the fact that it has to do with engagement and encountering, which can either be for good or for evil. At any rate, going on with the sins, the nidachta. Right. Okay. So we did that. Right. Asher. This is an interesting statement here. Asher chalak Hashem Elokecha otam. So this word chalak can mean to divide. Chelek means apart. Right. And here we have zamin here in the Aramaic, which has that idea that God apportioned it, right? That the Lord your God apportioned them these particular, the beliefs in these particular things to the other nations, l'chol ha'amim, to all the nations, tachat kol hashamayim, underneath all the heavens. And this leads us actually to what I consider to be a difficult Rashi. And it's one of those situations where I think it's reflective of a time, sadly, to some extent, there's some of it going on even now, uh, where where there is enmity and hatred and things like that, and especially the way in which Jews were treated in the past, and to some extent, it's reflected in present-day anti-Semitism, which is just this irrational hatred going on. So let's see. Here we go. Upen tisa enecha, and lest you cast your eyes up. lehistakel badavar. So it means to look, to observe this thing, velatet lev, and to concentrate. Latet lev means to pay attention, something like that. Sim lev here nowadays, if in modern Hebrew, means pay attention. Litot acharehem, to go to make. Litot means to make a mistake, essentially, right? To follow them by mistake, so that that you believe these things and believe they have the power over you, etc., etc. Asher chalak, and here's what I consider to be a difficult Rashi, right? Sahi l'chol hamim, to all the nations. And on the simple level, it could mean, and even then, even if we translate it as, which God apportioned to the other nations, it still raises all kinds of questions, right? Does it mean that the fact that other nations may practice idolatry is okay because God apportioned them? But then it raises the question as to why. What did they do to deserve the fact that they have these false beliefs? So it's problematic. So he says, he explains la'ir lahem. So la'ir lahem would mean, in a sense, let me see if that's actually quoting from the Torah here. I don't think so. But apparently it's saying, that they would consider these to be legitimate.
It says here it's from Megillot
Yeah,
9b.
Megillah. Yeah, that's the tractate Megillah. Right. So that's the interpretation in the Talmud on page. It says here 8, and apparently you said it says 9 over there.
9b.
Okay, so it's a bad reference, but anyway, that's that's the interpretation. How do they interpret Laha'ir Lahem?
It just says to illuminate for them. And
Okay,
then in
that's good.
parentheses,
Yeah.
all peoples.
Yes. So again, interesting. I wonder if the Gemara is dealing with the difficulty that when it says that God apportioned it to them, it just means to give them illumination, just like he does for all, for the other things too, for all people, for us as well. In other words, the idea, I'll try and explain. In other words, all that God meant to do was to illuminate these, to use them as sources of illumination, just like we use the sun as a source of illumination, or the moon, or the stars, okay? And that they themselves, that it was the nations themselves that misrepresented them as gods, that it was the people themselves. And it's not suggesting that God did anything to try to, deceive them. But here we go, okay? Davar acher, the Elohut, another interpretation that God gave it to them as gods, as idols, right? That they should see these things as gods. So here's Rashi explaining this. So laha'ir lahem, he means to be their gods, to serve as their gods. Lo mina'an, that God did not prevent them militaot acharehem, from making a mistake in following them. Ella, however, hechalikam, and again, the word chalak can also mean smooth. In other words, he smoothed the way. He made it easy for them. Bedivrei havlehem, in their vain words, right? In their mistaken words, letardam min ha'olam, to remove them from the world. Wow. I mean, that I find to be a very difficult Rashi, and a very difficult piece for me simply to accept, right? However, he goes on to say, V'chein hu omer, Rashi gives another supportive example from Psalm 36. Ki hechelik elav be'enav. In other words, that he made it easy in his eyes. Nimtso avono, in order to determine, to find out his iniquity, lisno, to hate him. So, in other words, tough concepts here. That I just, how one tries to find a place for these particular things. I think, for example, of Bilam, of where Bilam wants to go and curse the Jewish people. And finally, God says, okay, it's all right for you to go. And then, of course, the angel is there to kill him. And that, in a sense, that if we are stubborn enough, at a certain point, God says, okay, you're going to be that stubborn? I'm not going to make it hard for you to get yourself really into trouble. But even that, sort of sounds counter to our idea of a kind, and loving God. And so, trying to wrap my head around this kind of Rashi isn't easy. And, I come up with sort of trying to think of it contextually and knowing, at least to some extent, the hatred and the terrible ways in which the Jewish people have been treated. So it's hard. It goes against my understanding that all humanity is created in the divine image. The question is whether we can mess things up sufficiently. And I also don't feel comfortable with blanket condemnations of other peoples and cultures. And this comes very close to sounding like that. And I think we have to try very hard, not to take it that way. Or we're being tested. That's the other alternative that I have in dealing with this. So there's no question that we ourselves have to be very careful, but between the words of Moses and the interpretation that we have here, not to be lured into various types of invidious idolatry, which I think actually go on to this day and are actually a serious issue. So if you have any comments, I certainly welcome them. Going on.
Yeah, I do.
Please.
Okay, we're not supposed to make graven images of anything that is in heaven or earth below, whatever, everything. The ark with the winged angels
Yes.
over it.
Right.
It's an exception, but it's all what is the exception that proves the rule? Or is it,
Right.
is it oops? Or
very nice. So
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Golda, for bringing that up. The point is not to worship them, right? It's saying to make these things and to worship them.
That's what I figured is what we were dealing with here.
Because that's the big issue, because for some people, they become iconoclastic. And I don't think Judaism is preaching iconoclasm.
Right.
Okay? I don't know, iconoclasm? I don't know. Yeah.
Right. It's because, for a long while there, you couldn't make anything that looked like anything.
Right. And we know
for no reason at all, but not because I've got Jewishy things all over my house that have
right.
that look like people, that look like things, that look like whatever,
Well,
not like God, but because we don't know what God looks like, but
well, not
because
just
can't put God in a box.
Well, not just that, but again, the idea that they might be worshipped. So there's absolutely nothing to suggest that these cherubim that were on the ark were an object of worship. Now, I know that in Islam,
they're a focus, though.
They're symbolic. Symbolic.
Well, like where we put the ark and we put everything at the east because that's where we're supposed to be.
Well,
I mean, it's all kind of connected.
I think iconography is always symbolic. I don't think that people worship icons. If they have a little statuette or a picture, like of the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or of Jesus or whatever, I don't think they're worshiping the photo. I think it's symbolic. It's always symbolic.
I wouldn't say always, just like never say never. Don't careful about always, because when they talk about the statue of Mary bleeding and stuff like that they really actually are worshiping these things in a sense. that it's, so in other
I
words,
see what you're saying. Yeah.
Hmm.
it's subtle. You
Yeah,
have
I
to
see what you're
understand
saying.
that there's
Right.
a subtle distinction here.
It's an easy leap.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I
Hmm.
agree with you, and I think for that reason, that in mosques you never see pictures. They develop this beautiful calligraphy as a way of an art form because of their not wanting in any way to make pictures of things. So
Well,
there's a much greater sensitivity on the part of Islam regarding iconography. Go ahead.
I learned that in the old European synagogues of Eastern Europe that they generally, and also their illustrated Bibles and Haggadah, that they would use a lot of times animal pictures
Yes,
because they were distinguishing, even though this one says don't even do animals, but what
Right.
they were distinguishing is that God being people being created in God's image.
right,
So
right.
that was a
Right.
little too
Interesting.
close.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting issue. And the my understanding of idolatry is actually it has to do with replacing God, that is to say, the ultimate and transcendent one, with anything else. That is essentially the nature of idolatry. That it isn't, even though here we're seeing it more in terms of icons, and physical images, but nevertheless, the idea is this replacement of the divine, of the ultimate divine creator of the universe, with something that is a physical object. But I mean, I think we have to be careful because, when the way in which we relate to computers and in fact, artificial intelligence these days and this kind of stuff, are we getting close to, putting our trust in these sorts of things and recognizing that they are tools and nothing more than that? At any rate, at this point, let me see where we are. Okay, so I think we finished. Did we finish the rush? Yes, we did. At any rate, there is stuff to think about with this particular passage. As I said, it's not an easy passage to work with. Not for me anyway. Some people might find it easy. I have to tell you, I so truly believe in humanity, and that God is the God of humanity, and that other religions are simply other places in the palace, especially nowadays. So, okay, we'll stop. I'm going to stop the share. And thank you. And please God, we will continue tomorrow.